I bought this clean titled Range Rover for only $1,400, totally sight unseen, based off of just 10 photos and nothing else. My name is Sam Crack, and if you know me, I like to buy cars from the salvage auction, but I typically adhere to a strict set of rules. I mostly buy running and driving crash damage insurance lots, but only after doing a ton of research. The site I'm looking at is autoauctions.io, which is what I use to investigate every single car I bid on. It clears the bias up from the auctions who are just pushing you to profusely bid on the lot and provides straight up data on each specific car. Kind of like a Carfax report, but for misfit cars. It's helped me navigate the information for pretty much every single car I've bought to this day, but for this specific Range Rover, the data is super mysterious. It's marked as a non-runner, non-driver, there's no mileage indicated, not even in the dashboard photos, which is extremely weird because they'll usually bring a jump starter box out to attempt to read the mileage. The seller type is even unlisted, which is a huge red flag. This is one of the most important things you can look for when buying at the auctions. I always recommend only buying from insurance companies. The only thing we're told is that it has mechanical damage, which is really typical of any old Land Rover. And I've seen mechanical damage marked on lots that have as little as a bad battery and as bad as a locked up engine. So this car is a complete gamble, but with a verified winning bid of only $1,400, there's clearly way more value in parts alone here. Pictures of the car are stellar. It looks all original, well taken care of, and extremely clean inside and out. But as you're about to find out, pictures only tell a fraction of this story. So key in my hand, they gave it to me in the office. Ignition right here. Nothing. Now, go ahead and turn that out. The hood already looked like it was popped here. Let's see. Yeah, it is. It's loose. So I go. The grill's nice and wobbly right there. Oh, everything seems to be here. Let's see, battery. Yeah. And it's from 719, so that's like a really new battery. Well, we could try and jump start this right now, but that would not be a wise decision, especially with such an unknown here. Real briefly, just looking at the interior, this car was kept for many years in very good shape, just like the picture showed. But in person, this is not going to be a 50 or 60,000 mile car. Very least, it's going to be in the hundreds. It's been used, well used. You could see a lot of things held together here with zip ties. But overall, just like the photo showed, really clean. I mean, these floor mats almost look brand new for how old of a car it is. Headliner looks old and stained, which is pretty typical for this old of a car. What I want to do is get on the road. Let's get this home and let's start dissecting it. See if we can't make it work, or if this gamble turns out like pretty much every other gamble does. All right, we've made it home on the Range with the Range. We are one step closer to rolling in style. Now, I know what you're thinking, Sam, got a different look here. You must have spent a fortune on these Gucci shades, big face watch, the polo hoodie, but the pinky ring that doubles as a fidget spinner. Well, you know me better than that. I don't buy anything unless I get a good deal on it, and that's why I use Honey, the internet's best browser extension that saves you money every single time you shop online. Now, if our Range Rover has any hope of ever being roadworthy again, we're going to need to stock up on a bunch of supplies at the auto parts store. I add everything to my cart, and because I have Honey installed, during checkout, the dancing coin guy is partying hard because we're about to have a great time. He automatically applies the internet's best coupon codes, and bam, I just saved $25 without doing any additional legwork. And since Honey works with over 20,000 online retailers, you can assure you're always getting the best price, whether it's at Amazon, your favorite pizza spot, and even super niche shops like eManual, the place I buy all my automotive shop manuals. Here's the one we need for the Range Rover. Proceed to checkout, and thanks Dancing Coin Guy for the cool 15% off. It's super simple to use, installs in just 2 clicks, and you can download it right now totally free by visiting joinhoney.com/samcrack. Now check this out. Viewers of mine that have downloaded Honey using this link right here have collectively saved over $450,000. I know it's personally saved me a few $1,000s alone this year in purchases just for my automotive projects. So again, visit joinhoney.com/samcrack or simply click my link in the description box below. Now I got to give a huge thanks to Honey for allowing me to ball on a budget and for also sponsoring this video. Now it's time to picture me rolling. But before we do that, we've got to get this Range Rover off the trailer, and before we get it off the trailer, we got to get the engine running. Before we get the engine running, we got to figure out why it's not cranking in the first place, and a lot of that work will happen underneath the engine bay here. Now before we get underneath there, I just want to point out a few things, because the more I look at this car, the more I realize maybe it wasn't such a bad gamble. Couple things going on. Again, it's dirty, but the body condition is excellent. These 2 little stripes here, well, these are just some sort of adhesive strips. Maybe somebody had something going on right there. Piece of trim. There's a lot of extras that this car has, like the sidebars here. We've got the roof racks up there, and then up front we've got this grill guard that seems to be an OEM Range Rover grill guard. Something like that new had to cost several hundred, if not $1,000, and used. I'm sure you could part out just these accessories for several $100s to recoup a lot of the purchase price of this car. The other part that doesn't make it that bad of a gamble is, again, it's a complete car. I've already shown you the interior. We've got decent interior, decent carpets, really decent parts everywhere. I would guess right off the top of my head, $4-5 worth of parts just sitting here, but that's not what we're after. We're after a running and driving Range Rover for less than the price of a new iPhone. Now, this generation of Range Rover came from the factory with an air suspension, and usually when you see these old, cheap, rundown Range Rovers at the auction, 1 or more corners will be sagging. Sometimes the entire car will be slammed to the ground. But look, we're sitting at a perfectly normal ride height, which tells me one of 2 things. Either we have a working air suspension, which is a huge repair bill that won't land on us, or they've converted this to a traditional coil suspension setup, which is also very costly. Either way, we're sitting real nice. Let's get underneath the rear of the car and just see what sort of suspension setup it has. And yep, you could tell right there. See this? That is an air spring, which means we are riding on an air suspension, and an old air spring with that rubber surround, well, it will be all cracked and chewed up. This has definitely been replaced, and it is in really nice shape. And even this rear trailing arm, super clean. The bushings look all nice. I don't see any cracks, no rust underneath here. And see this tire even. The wear is nice and even on the tire. Someone really maintained this truck. Now that nice air suspension won't do us any good if we can't drive the car. So let's get underneath the hood, see what's going on there, and see if we can't make this car run as good as it looks. Now, something I noticed at the auction, showed you already, we've got a battery from 7 of 2019. This is a big battery right here. We're dealing with a 900 cold cranking amps battery. I don't have a portable jump box capable of replicating a battery of this size, so we're gonna try and bring it back to life. If we can, it will save us a good chunk of money. Let's go ahead, hook this up to the battery charger, and while it's charging, we'll go and check some of the fluids, make sure it's good enough to turn over. And just as I suspected, our battery is so dead that my battery charger doesn't even recognize that it's hooked up to a battery. Now, this is a common issue. If you were to take this to a auto parts store, they test it and say, oh, it's bad. There's one last trick that we can try to bring this battery back to life. When you have a Ferrari broken or working, it's always a good idea to keep spare batteries, because they go through them so quickly. Right there's a spare that I've had. Right here's our Range Rover battery. I've got them connected just using a set of jumper cables. If we look at our battery charger down here, it's telling us still to please put the clamps on. So if we go and hook the clamps up to our Range Rover battery now, you're going to see it's going to recognize that it's hooked up to a battery. That's thanks to our secondary battery right here. We're just going to go ahead and set it for 10 amps. And we'll send a little bit of a charge to it. Let's come back in about an hour. We'll disconnect the jumpers. We'll plug it directly into the battery charger. And at that point, this should have got enough charge to recognize it as a battery and charge on its own. While we're waiting for that to charge, let's cross our fingers, say a prayer, and do the simple stuff. We want to pull the dipstick, make sure we've got oil in. Okay, we definitely have oil, but we have more than oil. Can you see that? And right there is our first roadblock in the cheap Range Rover. That's not what oil is supposed to look like. That is oil mixed with probably some coolant. Well, since we suspect that that's coolant, let's just take a quick look at our coolant reservoir, and that is dry as could be. There's nothing in there. And seeing how high the oil coolant mixture was on that dipstick tells me that a lot of the radiator's coolant has made its way into the crankcase. So I think what we're experiencing here is textbook bad head gasket. Now, it's not just bad head gasket because we have that milky looking oil. You can have coolant mixed in your oil a number of different ways that have nothing to do with the head gasket. But just due to the circumstances of how I bought this car, salvage auction, clean title, a car that is probably towards the end of its lifespan. These old Range Rovers are really unreliable. So we're going to stick with bad head gasket until proven otherwise. Now, if you took a car like this into the shop, told them you wanted your head gasket replaced, the labor costs alone would probably run between $2 and $3 grand. The gasket itself is probably a $30 to $50 part, so not expensive there. It's just very labor intensive. Most people that blow a head gasket and want to keep the car, they'll go find a used motor at a junkyard and swap it before they'll put in a head gasket, because if you overheated your engine and then you blew the head gasket, well, chances are you damage the heads in the process, and there's a million other things that it can affect. So this is not the end quite yet of the cheap Range Rover. We're going to dive quite a bit deeper here and see if we can at least get it running and maybe driving. It all depends on the severity of the issue we have at hand. It is just a disaster under here. Everything is coated in oil, which is pretty standard fare for an old BMW engine, which is what this Range Rover has. Bottom of the oil pan saturated, but there's not a lot of that white coolant mixture oil, which means that this car was probably parked shortly after its head gasket blew. Right here's the drain bolt. I want to undo that right quick, and I'm pretty sure we know what's going to come out of it. Right now I'm letting out the radiator petcock, and it's clearly just, that's water. That's regular water. There's not even any coolant in there. So someone was obviously losing coolant, and they decided to just go and fill it up with water and see if it drained out again. But something that I find really interesting, another clue as to what is going on with this car, is if you look at the radiator itself, this appears to be a brand new radiator. Radiators that even have 1,000 or a couple thousand miles on them are usually dirty and dusty. This one is so clean and so new looking that, yeah, someone must have had their overheating issue, threw the radiator at it, not realizing that they had a much larger issue. A little while later, things are still charging, so let's go ahead and shut that off, and then we will remove our charging clamps. We'll take off our jumper cables, and let's go ahead and put our charging clamps back in place here. See what happens when we do. And there we go. Look, we're getting a reading on this battery, really weak. 20% capacity, 11.7 volts. Now, instead of going to charge, I like this feature right here, recondition. It tries to bring back these really dead batteries. All it's doing is charging things in a slow and like random fashion. So we'll leave this, come back to it when it's finished. After a very long time, all that milky oil is finally out of the engine, and I'm thinking it might be a good idea to dig a little bit deeper, pull our plug, see if we got any wetness on any one of the plugs. That'll tell us where our head gasket leak is. Now, these are the covers right here for our spark plugs, and it's really cool how hidden the fasteners are in there. Our shop manual tells us that this is how you get to the bolts that are holding the cover in place. You've got one hidden cover right there, and you got another one right back here. We're going to do the same thing on the other side, pop those off, and pull all 8 spark plugs. Using one of these shop manuals is almost a necessity when pulling apart a car for the first time, so you don't waste time looking for things like those hidden screw covers. I think I paid like 20 bucks for this manual. They're usually really cheap, and they're the same exact ones that the dealership uses. Every time I use one of these manuals or just show a diagram from them, everyone asks where I get them from, so I'm just going to go ahead and drop a link to e-manual in the description box. They have them for pretty much every make and model, and as you can see, it gives us step-by-step directions on how to remove the valve covers and the entire ignition system. Okay, now check this out. The coil pack on the 4th cylinder all the way back here on the passenger side was a little dirty on the tip. So I took that spark plug out all the way first, and just look at it, it's coated in oil. We got one other coated spark plug, same exact location, opposite side of engine. So both of the ones closest to the firewall, coated in oil. That's likely where our head gasket has failed. And so right now, I think we're gonna fill this up with oil. We're gonna do a compression test, and we'll start with testing those 2 cylinders, because those are the ones that could lead to, well, possibly the end of this Range Rover. In order to perform our compression test, we're gonna need to put power to the car. So let's go check our battery and see if it's been repaired. Our screen is shut off. If we wake it up, it says repair completed. Now that doesn't mean that we did, in fact, bring the battery back to life, but we could tell very quickly with my little battery tester here whether it was brought back to life. So remember, this is 900 cold cranking amps. So on this, we'll just want to make sure that we're at 900, and it will tell us that it is great. So right there, we rejuvenated our otherwise dead battery. Oh, nice little snap noise there, which means we definitely have some juice to the car at this point. It's very faint, but I can hear that electrical noise that most cars have. I'm gonna turn the key now, see if anything happens. Oh yeah, got power to everything. Now this lower screen is super pixelated. Check it out. There's the odometer. You can't hardly see it, but does that say, that looks like, if I had to take a guess, 221,000 miles, 348, 340. You can't even tell, it's so pixelated. So there's the reason why we didn't have our mileage recorded. But that's definitely not a number 1 in the first column there. That's a number 2. This car has over 200,000 miles. Now, we still don't want to start it quite yet, but at the very least, our electronics seem to work pretty good. When there's a Sirius radio up here where the sunglasses holder was, 21 Savage bank account is on right now. I wish I could hear that. Does that work? Oh, this is so pixelated you can't even see it. The person that owned this car before, just like me, when you sing that song bank account, you got to go, I got 1, 2, 3, 4 in my bank account. In my bank account. You don't make it all the way to the number 8. Couple things here. I started our compression test on the cylinder that had the spark plug that was coated in oil, and it had decent compression. Now that doesn't tell us a whole lot. Oil will actually help create decent compression even if you have some failed hard component there. So things are still a mystery. When I got to the second cylinder, I got a bad compression reading, but I also started hearing a weak crank. This thing really should be on some sort of charger while we're doing this compression test. So I stopped right there because I don't want to burn out the battery and go through the procedure that I showed you earlier. Now, if you notice, the oil on the spark plug was just a dirty, used-looking motor oil color. It wasn't that frothy white crankcase oil that we had. That's a really good sign, because if oil is entering the cylinder via the blown head gasket, then this is something that would require a full engine teardown, or a swap of the motor would be the more sensible option. But none of these are sensible options here. We're talking about a $1,400 Range Rover that, even if it is a running and driving car, it's only worth maybe about $3,500 to $4,500. So we want to stick to quick, easy, and cheap fixes for this car, if they'll even work. And we're going to be testing those out. I'm confident that we will at least be able to get this car started. Driving a little bit, it'll be interesting to see how much longer we can make it last, especially given that it has over 220,000 miles. Now, you might think I'm crazy, wondering why I'm bringing this upon myself, but I get tons of emails from you guys at home asking, hey, I saw this car, I know it's going to sell for cheap, it just says mechanical damage. And like I said earlier, I've seen major mechanically damaged cars at the salvage auction, and I've seen old Toyotas that need nothing more than a battery, maybe it's a sensor of some sort or a fuse, that get marked as mechanical damage. So if you're anxious to see what it's going to take to get this Range Rover running, and maybe even enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a huge like. If you're not already following me on Instagram, where I'll be posting Range Rover updates there before they go live here on YouTube, just go right here, click the link down in the description box below. Remember, everything I did in this video today, you could do at home. You can bid on these cars at the salvage auction. You could get a repair manual and use regular hand tools. Just dive right into that engine, figure out what's going on, and maybe even get a cheap car for yourself to refurbish. It's not hard. Anybody can do it with the proper set of guidance and a few tools. And somebody reminded me in the comment section last time, a little bit of money. With that being said, guys, I want to thank each and every one of you for watching today, and I'll catch you very soon.